Welcome, everyone. Today we'll present to you a case study on human beaver conflicts and beaver wetland restorations by Brandon Fish, Stacey Goeckeritz, Angela Trnka, and Anastasia Williams.
Beaver background. The North American beaver was once abundant all over North America before European settlers began harvesting beavers for their pelts for the fur trade in the 1800s and drastically changing the landscape through logging, draining wetlands, and other practices. The historic population was estimated to be 60 to 400 million, but by the 1900s, only 100,000 remained. Background: beavers, ecoservices, and natural history. Beavers are keystone species and ecosystem engineers. They provide a plethora of benefits and ecological services in their habitat through building lodges and dams that control water flow. Beavers can enhance water quality and create refuges and habitat for other species. Beavers prefer freshwater systems such as marshes with aspen and willow for habitat. They construct their dams and lodges in the spring and summer, and then prepare food caches in the fall for winter, where they spend their time in their lodges. Beavers feed on plants like grasses and leaves in the spring and summer, and in the colder months they switch to their cache of woody vegetation like aspen and willow. Beavers are most active at night, making them nocturnal, but they also occur during dawn and dusk, making them crepuscular. Beavers typically reach sexual maturity around 2 to 3 years and mate during January and February and have 2 to 4 kits in the spring.
North American beavers can be found throughout the continent. They are native to all provinces in Canada and all continental states of the United States. Beavers prefer to live in riparian habitats that feature key plant species including aspen, willow, and cottonwood. They require consistent water flow and typically inhabit low-gradient rivers, floodplains, and wetlands.
Restoration and beavers. Efforts have been made all over the U.S. to increase beaver populations through wetland restoration, beaver reintroduction, and recruitment. Wetlands have drastically decreased throughout the U.S. since the 1780s. Sadly, less than 6% of wetlands remain intact in the lower 48 states. Agriculture and land development have been the primary drivers of wetland decline. Wetlands provide beavers with food, cover, and other resources they need to build their lodges and raise their young.
Why restore wetlands? Wetlands provide myriad ecological benefits to both wildlife and to humans. Among these is flood control, as wetlands slow stormwater velocity, allowing more time for infiltration, and their soils also retain water. Wetlands also act as natural filters that reduce water contamination. Sedimentation and infiltration remove particulate matter from erosion and other contamination sources, while processes such as adsorption and biosorption chemically bind contaminants. And wetlands provide wildlife habitat. As transition zones, wetlands provide the opportunity for greater variety in vegetative structure and composition, creating heterogeneity in the landscape that can support more diverse species.
There are two main groups of beneficiaries that are invested or affected by beaver presence. The first group are private land managers whose land or livestock could be affected by beavers. This group includes ranchers, farmers, local residents, and fishery workers. The second group oversees public lands, and they include municipal workers and wildlife managers.
Beneficiary roles will vary by situation, but roles might include improvement of information for managers. For instance, managers might assume that ranchers would find beaver damage to outweigh benefits, when a study by Charnley et al. 2020 actually found that surveyed ranchers thought beaver benefits outweighed drawbacks. Beneficiaries can also form diverse task forces to devise mutually acceptable compromises for management at times when agency solutions might encounter resistance if beneficiaries were not involved in planning. Beneficiaries can also improve citizen engagement and cooperation. A study by Yarmy and Hood in 2020 found that many interviewees were unsure how or if the local government was addressing beaver conflicts. Some farmers also felt that when management did occur, the management action chosen or the timing of the action created further conflicts. Involving beneficiaries in management decisions could alleviate such concerns. Beneficiaries might also be able to directly perform management actions depending on their qualifications, the wildlife agency capacity, and legal requirements such as permits for beaver relocation or dam removal. And beneficiaries can also provide regular feedback throughout plan implementation so that plans may be adapted as necessary to successfully meet beneficiary needs as the landscape changes after beaver introduction. Specific objectives of management actions must be identified. Scientifically measurable objectives related to ecosystem health might include restoration of wetland hydrology and functionality, improvement of biodiversity and structural diversity in and around the riparian area, and improvement of water availability in soils. Management objectives should also consider human dimensions. Such objectives might include maintaining cooperative relationships with beneficiaries throughout the planning and management process, constraining beaver impacts to an area beneficiaries find acceptable, and minimizing both perceived and actual damage to human interests by beaver activity. Beaver activity has numerous positive impacts. Their dams help to lower stream temperatures, slow stream velocity, and increase sediment deposition in beaver ponds, reducing downstream turbidity and increasing downstream water quality. Dams and channels also increase resistance to drought and disturbance by elevating water tables and retaining runoff during high flow events. In addition, beaver activity increases sedimentation in incised streams, helping to reconnect streams with floodplains and increasing water availability throughout the riparian area. Beaver foraging activity alters woody plant communities, and flooding alters herbaceous communities, creating disturbance that promotes diversity in species structure and composition, which, in turn, diversifies habitat and resources available to the animal community. Some species of conservation concern even prefer breeding in ponds with active beavers, such as the declining northern leopard frog in Wyoming. In addition, the availability of shelter and food resources in beaver lodges leads to increased abundance and species richness of non-beaver animals, particularly in the autumn. Riparian corridors dammed by beavers have also been relatively unaffected by wildfires, creating refugia from fire for many species.
However, beaver activity can also result in a variety of negative impacts as well. This includes flooded pastures or rangeland, the foraging and felling of desired trees, alterations to hydrology that could lead to increased water level, reduced flow, and flooding, as well as damages to property caused by the felling of forest trees.
Mitigating impacts. There are many ways that managers can mitigate beaver impacts, such as natural flood management, which is a strategy that uses nature-based techniques to reduce floods, design and technology, such as low devices to lower water levels behind dams, beaver removal. There can be permits that allow lethal removal of beavers on the permittee's property outside of regulated trapping season. Regulated trapping season is typically November throughout April across the country. Beavers don't have a single nationwide protection status in the U.S., as their protection varies by state. Relocating beavers is another method, trapping and moving the beavers elsewhere. Educational programs. Many programs exist to mitigate conflicts. Programs like the Beaver Institute provide training for conflict management and restoration. There's also public outreach programs for coexistence, such as the Matthew Beaver Project, Beaver Trust, Human Beaver Coexistence Fund as well. Indirect measures like compensation for damage or payments of landowners to host beavers are also some techniques.
One type of mitigation strategy that can be used to reduce the likelihood of beaver damage is to redirect them. Water flow redirection involves the utilizing water flow control devices or beaver deceivers to divert water flow around or under a beaver dam. Pipes and fences are placed in order to create an open channel for water that won't disturb the beavers and won't get plugged up by them either. This allows beaver dams to be built and limits flooding to acceptable levels. Another redirection method involves using beaver deterrent devices. This includes predator odor-based sprays that use predator musk and urine to scare off beavers. Also, fences and cages can be used to protect trees from beaver foraging and encourages them to go elsewhere for food. Lastly, flavored and texturized paints can be used to make trees less appetizing for beavers. Beaver translocation is a humane type of removal that involves removing beavers from areas that they are unwanted and taking them to areas where they are wanted and allowed to colonize. Successful translocations require appropriate habitat selection, specifically sites with presence of willow stands and sufficient riparian habitat. It also requires sufficient biotic and abiotic condition. This means a reduced presence of predators, plentiful sources of food, necessary water flow, appropriate temperatures, and reduced competition with ungulate species. Finally, beaver dam analogs could potentially help. The presence of BDAs can help beavers feel more acclimated to their site, but there is no clear consensus on whether these analogs improve beaver survival after being translocated.
Management options. A couple of management options for beavers is recruiting or reintroduction. Recruiting beavers involves creating, restoring, and or enhancing habitat to attract the beavers to the areas. And reintroduction is the physical act of bringing beavers back to an area where they once occurred. There have been many successful wetland projects where these methods allowed beavers to assist in transforming agricultural lands into wetland ecosystems once again. A good example of this is the Woody Creek in the lower Matthew River watershed in Washington State. This was a restoration project. The effort reintroduced 3 beaver pairs in 2014, which led to beaver families establishing in 39 locations in the watershed by 2019. Also, by 2019, there were an estimated 329 beavers in the watershed area. The beavers also enhanced riparian areas through sediment control and created ponds that stored a lot of water. Managers estimated 65 million gallons to be stored by 2019. The water storage is also great for periods of drought for the ecosystem, and other wildlife that lives there benefits from this.
Another management option are beaver dam analogs. These are used when beavers can't be there, but their inspired benefits are still desired. Beavers are vital for healthy ecosystems, but their dams can flood roads, farmland, and create conflict with people. A practical solution is beaver dam analogs, or BDAs, human-made structures that mimic natural beaver dams. BDAs provide habitat for beavers in safer areas, reducing damage near infrastructure. They also restore stream function, raise water tables, improve fish habitat, and promote riparian vegetation. This approach offers a non-lethal coexistence strategy that balances human needs with ecological benefits. Research supports that BDAs as an effective tool for stream restoration and conflict mitigation. So upon evaluation, how do we know it's working? By reflecting on the management objectives, asking ourselves and all our stakeholders, have our objectives been met? Are we making things better by our collective decisions and actions? If so, that is success, or at least on the right path to success. There are 2 major types of objectives we're trying to meet with beaver wetland restorations: ecosystem health objectives and human dimension objectives. When it comes to ecosystem health, we are looking for improvements to ecosystem services. This includes enhanced hydrology, enhanced soil, and pollution filtration. With these objectives met, we should also expect to see improvements in biodiversity and species abundance in the observed area. For human dimension objectives, we are hoping to see a reduction in conflict overall. By allowing beavers to enhance the ecosystem and utilizing the conflict mitigation strategies, we hope to see reduction to overall conflict and potential coexistence between human and beaver populations. We would also consider the establishment of a funding or compensation program for land managers that facilitate beaver populations. Lastly, we would want to see these programs established and funded. If an objective hasn't been met, we can collect data and go back to brainstorming solutions within an adaptive resource management framework. These types of projects are an iterative process that stays current and reactive because we can make adjustments when we receive new data. This data informs future management actions and allows the project to be more effective and specifically tailored for the situation.
Restored beaver wetlands provide ecological benefits, but beavers alter landscapes in ways that conflict with humans. To minimize these, restoration plan input should be solicited from broad groups of beneficiaries, and clear objectives should be set. Numerous management options exist, but no matter which alternatives are selected, success after implementation should be evaluated with measurable criteria related to project objectives. Beneficiary feedback should be considered alongside scientific results to guide adaptation of plans as necessary to ensure objectives are met.